Hey guys, it's Tyler, and welcome to another CGS live stream. I'm one of the concept art mentors here at the school, and in this session, we're going to continue what we started last time. That was on Monday of this week, which was this decorative frame design for the back of these night collector cards that I'm working on. So you can see some of the night images here on the left that we did before, and now this is going to be sort of the back of these collector cards. And some of the things that we're doing here can pertain to also digital UI frame design for something like a video game, for example. One kind of slight difference there is print. You can typically get away with something that's a little bit more fine grain, a little bit smaller, because of course people can hold things up to their face, right? If it's print, they can sort of adjust their distance a little bit easier than something on screen where we might want to consider readability at a reasonable distance from something like a monitor or television. With things like console UI in particular, there is a lot of attention paid to readability of UI and fonts and things on a television screen at a reasonable distance from the viewer, right? So with print, that's one of the things that's just slightly different, as well as, of course, having to consider things like the bleed area on the edges, the text-safe region. Well, actually, that's for both TV and for print, right? We have to think about those edges where fonts might be getting chopped off or distorted or warped. So that's in all cases, but the bleed edge, of course, is something that's print-specific. But a lot of these things are universal to UI and frame design in general. So you can see here we've got a rough idea of where we're headed with this. I think it's looking pretty good. I'm fairly pleased with how it's going so far. We've got the 6 stats that we're going to represent here as these sort of stained glass circle elements, and then some accompanying icons. We've decided to iconize the stats here. So we've got those all represented in a radial pattern. And we were playing around with colors last time, and after I stepped away and I was thinking about this more, I was like, why can't these colors just be different per character card? They could be themed to be appropriate to whatever suits the sort of image, the character. Maybe the character is wearing a lot of red, for example, then maybe these orbs become red, right? So I think that actually giving some room for variety there with the colors is the right choice. So we're not going to get too entrenched in color choices here. The rest of the UI is going to be fairly monochromatic to support all those varieties of colors that we might have for the stained glass elements. And now what we're going to basically do is go in and refine the drawing, get a bit more precise with all of these pieces so we can start to go in and render them out. All right, so let's dive in and do that. Hope you guys are having a good week. Thanks for joining me here. This is just a flat layer on top to knock everything back so that we can create a new layer on top and see what we're doing quite clearly. Now I'm going to turn on my grid, which is set to 25%, so we get a nice sort of halfway point expressed here. We can see that the design is mirrored horizontally but not vertically. So that might be something in terms of the entire document, right? And I think that might be something that we want to adjust. It's only ever so slightly offset vertically, and I'm beginning to think that is it's so close. Why not just put it in the middle and make our life a little easier? So let's go back and tweak that first. This is all of our fonts here. There's our radial grid, which see that that's not perfectly aligned either. So what we're going to do is let's redo that one as well, and we'll center that on the vertical and horizontal. Okay. So if we grab all this, we get most of what we need, but we're missing some of this stuff here. There we go. I think this is going to give us everything we want. Yep. And we'll just shift that down slightly there. And if you guys are going for precise amounts of movement, remember you can always use the arrow keys while you're in the move tool to nudge things 1 pixel at a time. It can be quite handy. All right, that's working. Now let's do a new perspective grid for ourselves. All right, excellent. And the colors of this grid here are not great. It's a little hard to see. Let's change that. Okay, that's pretty loud. Good to take some time and just set your document up to be clear and very legible for what you're doing. And as we get more precise with the degrees here, we can see the original drawing was off in some ways. It's just fine. Getting these circular elements out of the way first. we're going to go. Go about there with that. I was thinking that we had to a particular degree of rotation there, but it seems that we went, for aesthetic reasons, we sort of have an arbitrary amount, which is totally fine. Want that one right there. Yeah, let's actually just take this one and rotate it because I want that to be identical in size. So we're sacrificing some accuracy in terms of concentricity, but the size is going to be identical, and I think I can eyeball the concentricity of those fairly well. Yep. I do sort of want this element to be at that 45 degrees, so there is some desire for me to push all these out and rotate them down more, but they start to get really close to the edge here. That's the challenge of having a design that's taller than it is wide. I think I'm going to have this be still in the 45. Now I think I do want it to be centered between the two, don't I? Alright. Bit of a challenge here, but that's fine. I think the aesthetics will be more benefited by having this angle be centered between the stat circles than following just the overall math there. All right. Yeah, funny enough, I think that diagonal right there on our grid works well for this. Neat. Sometimes this stuff just kind of works out. All right, let's get this one adjusted now. Great. Give ourselves a horizontal line to work with. Go all the way through on that. Now we'll do our center circles. Cool. We can see that that's almost perfect there on the horizontal flip, so that's really good. It's maybe 1 pixel off. Not really worried about that too much. Now let's take this and first of all, save our work. If you're doing anything right now, remember, save your work, save often. And we'll duplicate and flip vertically. See that the vertical flip there is a little bit more off, especially in terms of that center. So let's adjust that first a bit. Well, they're merged together. I mean, maybe we just kind of roll with it. Let's see. Yeah, with a little nudge, we can get it there, so. Bit of an awkward tangent there between the center of this part of the design and the corner circle there. So I'm thinking maybe I shift this element over a bit so there's equal padding between the different major frame elements around it. And you can see how going from the rough version of this to a more final pass, we have to be just a bit more careful about our choices and paying attention to tangents and just overall a higher degree of precision. Okay, so we're approaching now the area that can be more free-handed, or at least we should attempt to freehand this stuff. Let's see how it goes here. first, forgot to give myself a vertical line here for this middle section, so let's do that. Okay. And well, I suppose we could go through here and do some cleanup. We're gonna keep in mind that we're gonna flip this. So although we went through the trouble of, flipping and doing all that kind of thing to see everything, we're actually going to be working on like a quadrant of this. There'll be some uniqueness to this section down here with the plate being different and the corner element being different. But and of course the lighting will be different for the vertically flipped half of this. But this quadrant here will be identical to this quadrant. So we're gonna kind of focus our attention on this section. So the cleanup process here, I'm gonna worry about cleaning up this quadrant, but I'm not gonna worry about cleaning up the other ones initially. And this is going to have a sort of a rough metal and stone feel from a medieval fantasy universe. So I'm not worried about it having like mechanical precision. Like if it was a super futuristic sci-fi design, we'd have to be, really careful about doing things like hand erasing some of these elements here. But I'm actually not worried about that because in the end, I'm going to be adding some damage and some dings and wear to these sections, so a bit of variance isn't going to be an issue for us. And as we render this too, we'll likely find places where we may want to have additional detail, subdivide some of these things differently. As the light hits them, your impression of their shapes is going to be affected. Certain things might feel bigger or smaller. With just the lines, it can be a little hard sometimes to get a sense for your design choices. So this is going to give us a good framework, but it is certainly not the final execution. When we start adding some 3 dimensions to this, it will give us the clarity we need to potentially tweak that design. Okay, get some water here. Now let's take this part of the design and flip that and get that over into place here. We can see we had a reasonable amount of symmetry between those angles there. That's I think that's totally sufficient for the amount of precision that I want in this. Again, this is not meant to be like clockwork gears, right? We're not trying to have mechanical precision here. We just want a sense of aesthetic symmetry going on. So I think that's going to be totally reasonable. Now let's freehand this section down here. And when I'm drawing these lines, I'm trying to think about the 3-dimensional shape. Where the bevel is going to be happening? I'm thinking about sort of the height of the surface, the diagonals that are happening. And as we have the transition from this sort of scalloped edge to this edge, we're going to have a sort of a defining edge transition here along this area. That's why I've put a little line there to help myself feel that edge before we render it. And this section here is going to be diamond-like, and this technically is going to kind of come all the way through. So we can complete that. And as we start to get more of the design in here, you start to see where you can add elements of detail. And we might consider rounding some of these too. That'll give it more of a Gothic quality. It has that sort of a floral, flower-like pattern when you add these curving, these rounded bridges between shapes. Thinking about the negative forms. I'm not super jazzed about the asymmetry in these two spaces here, but yeah, it is what it is. I think it's close enough. Let's see, we play around with some kind of shape here. Let's see. Sorry, not a lot of narration here. This is really just me in the zone refining this stuff. Not a huge fan of the tangent happening there. So I guess I'll have to revise that shape's position slightly. No worries. There he goes. Is that on the same layer? Yeah, it was. Okay, you're gone. I'll have to remirror that. Those little corner marks is just a cheap trick to get Photoshop to mirror it properly along the center of the document. Although, there we go. It's like that didn't work. Forgot to hit the flip button. Okay, cool. Now that's living in a nice spot. I'm not a huge fan of the even banding here. There's 3, which is good. Odd numbers are good to be working with, but the even banding here is not my favorite, so let's change the ratios a bit. And any of you watching who are in my class, you'll know about those design ratios. Yeah, there we go. And I'll have to adjust this curve to fit, feel like it flows. So we'll just move this out a bit. Okay, yeah, it's looking a little sloppy in this section here. I guess, see, the problem is there's kind of a weird tangent there if we go thinner, right? Means we're gonna have to bring in this curve as well. Let's get this inner curve working first. And now we'll have the outer curve match. All right. I definitely like that anchor point there, but I think the extra line there was a little too much detail for my liking. Okay, let's start to merge some of this stuff together so we can play around a bit more organically with the interaction of all the shapes. But I think we're starting to get closer to a more final form of the design here, which is great. Okay, let's separate the pieces that are going to be unique to the top and bottom again here. So that'll be this piece and these corners. So what I want to do is allow myself the ability to mirror this layer here we're working with vertically, which also means I should take these unique elements here out of the layer. It's kind of amazing how complex something starts to look when you mirror it all over, right? Okay, and there's the unique corner elements there. Or, I mean, the unique vertical elements. I mean, they're corner elements as well, I suppose. And there's a little bit of cleanup needed on some of these that were invisible below, and of course this section here is going to need slightly different treatments. And this center line here, this horizontal divider, got really thick on us, so we're going to have to go in and revise that a bit. But that's not a big deal. Okay, with full symmetry on everything, we can start to get a sense of where the design may need to be adjusted. And I think this area just gets a bit too complex. What happens if we merge these shapes together here? Yeah. Sometimes it's just faster to hand draw some of these changes in really quickly. You feel like you can execute them with reasonable precision by hand. Just pop them in. Okay. And what if we added another one here? about right. Can remirror later. Just getting a sense for how it's going to feel. So I think that's cool. I like that. And what if this shape was all merged together here? Yeah, definitely like that change. Merge these together. Okay. I'm digging that so far. I'm going to add this little detail here to the bottom of the frame too, so we get some symmetry there, even though it's offset. At least we get that same shape happening on both sides there. Okay, yeah, I think that kind of completes that area a bit better. Move that over here. Move that down here. And then we get some of that diamond elements here kind of going all the way around, which I think is nice. I'm sort of just looking at the design and just assessing where I can kind of tweak the sense of overlap between layers, reduce detail, add detail. kind of a fun star-like quality to this middle area. I mean, I think clearly the most awkward part of the design is really this sort of empty space in here, so I don't really want to call attention to it. I kind of want to just leave it a bit simpler in there. And given that there's horizontal and vertical symmetry among the within the design overall, even though these shapes are kind of awkward compared to each other here, the fact that they're radially kind of mirrored around still gives them a sense of symmetry overall. We get that sort of radial symmetry, so it doesn't feel terrible in the final result. But I sort of wonder if this was a little bit lower like this. Instead of here, would that alleviate that better? It's a tricky one, but I think that might be worth playing with a little bit at least. Yeah, I think that helps the symmetry of that space feel a bit better. It's a slight change, but I think it's a good one. So let's re-mirror here. You know what we're going to do is I'm going to take this plate and reduce its height slightly so that we don't have, whoops, grabbed a little too much there. Let's actually, that shouldn't even be on there anyway, right? Squash this a bit. What I'm trying to do is give myself clearance for this shape to complete, so that when I mirror vertically, I don't have to worry about that being weird. And this piece here wants to be the unique top layer. That wants to be with this layer here. Okay, cool. We're starting to really get this in its final stages, which is just excellent. And we can move on to rendering. Okay, now we can flip this and both horizontally and vertically, we should be pretty much in the clear, except for, of course, these lines that need a bit more length in this section here, but that's not terrible. So before we go clean that up again, let's just see if we're happy with the design. I think it's really close. Just one last sort of pass here. You know, I think this piece right here just feels out of place. You know, there's this sense of the metal part terminating, transitioning into these sort of panels, radial panels nicely. And I think this area just feels not only over designed, but also just sort of misses an opportunity to continue that design motif radially. So let's tweak this area a little bit. Yeah, there we go. In fact, that taper might want to be a little bit longer. I've kind of truncated it quickly there. Let's let that breathe a bit more. There we go. There's something kind of nice about the size of this central diamond here. Makes me want this one to be a bit larger, so let's increase the size of that. Yep. All right. I think we're ready for that last mirror. One final cleanup. And then we'll start rendering. Did that just pop into place vertically? It did, didn't it? Neat. Love it when a plan comes together. Yeah, I completed that edge. Okay. I was wondering if that was same on top. And we could, of course, go to our sort of underdrawing if we wanted to and shift things around if we felt like it was distracting us. Where did we put that stuff? I think we had it in. Yeah, we had it there. I mean, this is sort of silly to do this, but it's just kind of my my OCD kicking in on that stuff there. I just want to center that there. And again, this outer bevel here to the frame is going to be pretty simple because this is in that printer cut edge area, and I want it to be just consistent throughout, so no matter where there's some room for error for the print cut. It can go anywhere, wander anywhere in this area, and that edge is going to feel just fine. All right. Last thing is just complete these lines once again. Oh, where was my... There we go. It's like, where are my guides on that? Okay. this stuff and can turn this layer all the way up, because now the mock-up we had below, well, look at that, looks kind of cool, right? The mock-up we had below is sort of irrelevant now, right? We have our sort of final line pass going on. And again, this is going to get rendered, so these lines are really going to disappear in the end. I mean, we're going to have some ambient occlusion and stuff in between the parts, so elements will feel line-like, where there's little overlaps and intersections between parts, but nothing is going to feel like a line drawing in the end. So this is basically a guide for us to render from. But yeah, the under stuff that we had before really doesn't serve any purpose anymore. This is all the only guide we really need. And so yeah, so let's go ahead and take the lines. We're going to drop these back in opacity. Actually, do I want to keep those separate? Let's put these in a group. Let's call this lines. Let's lower the opacity of the group here. I want to keep those two layers separate because again, those are kind of unique in terms of the vertical line of symmetry. So and now I'm going to make the overall darkness closer to what I'm thinking there. And now we're going to just start to do some highlights and shadows on here. I'm going to do kind of a grayscale render on this. I know you guys, if you guys have been following my streams here, you've seen some other processes that I've showed you, like the rendering and logical layers series, where we approach things a bit uniquely and differently than what would be a typical sort of grayscale to colorized render. In this case here, we're going to just do a more of a standard grayscale render and then colorize, because I don't imagine there'll be a lot of complex color choices happening anyway. And I think the lighting is going to be quite simple. The shapes are going to be quite simple. There's nothing that is that three-dimensional. I mean, certainly it's going to feel 3D in the end. There'll be bevels and stuff going on and all that. But it's not as if we're lighting a character, right? Or an object on a table or something like that. So we're going to do a typical kind of grayscale render here, and I'm going to think in terms of light and shadows, and we'll see how that goes. So our lighting is from the top. It's going to be perfectly down the top middle, so we have the ability to mirror horizontally here, or across the vertical here. First thing I'm doing is I'm just feeling out where the bevels are, where the forms are sort of catching the light and where the forms are going to be getting shadowed. And I'm not going to blast these highlights right now. It's easy for us to push them further later. We're going to sneak up on these values. And drop these lines back a bit more. And I'm going to cross over into this side a little bit as I'm painting, just because it's intuitive, it's quick to do, and gives me a sense of what's going on across the center line there, even though we're going to mirror. I'll be careful not to waste too much time over here on this side, but it's just going to kind of happen a little bit as we go. And there'll be some drop shadow happening on the inside of this edge here. The shadow will be coming down on top of the glass in the middle here. I'm not going to paint that shadow in here. We'll do that as a separate layer because I'm going to end up cutting these holes out of this this particular layer here. And this is where we can start to make decisions about the shapes more clearly. We can push and pull them and decide the angle of some of these bevels, how flat some of these things feel. And what you'll notice is the sort of flat areas, these sort of ambiguous areas here where there's not clear beveling going on, tend to be the trickiest to resolve on the render, which is why when you're doing the line art and we're making those choices, we want to really be thinking as three-dimensional as possible so that when we get to this stage, we don't run into what feels like a bunch of decisions that we have to make regarding the shapes that are happening. But I always intended this area to be a bit flat anyway. But I was looking at it thinking, well, do I want to bevel this or add some extra depth? And I don't know yet. Maybe I will. Could be. One thing we are doing is we're thinking about one light source at a time here. It's that top center light, but I'm going to be adding in a bit of other lights. Well, probably just mainly one other light, kind of from below, kind of a fill light, and it may have a bit of color to it, we'll see. But I don't want the metal and stone, even though it's all going to be quite gray, to allow those other elements, the glass, to pop and be the focal point. I don't want the gray to feel, lifeless. I want it to still have a bit of interesting variation within it, and so we can inject some colors through the lighting that way. That's going to come much later in the render, though. Yeah, it's just going to add some bit of texture to this section here. We'll get more texture in later. I'm just going to do a quick pass on this to get a sense for the fact that it's going to have some of that going on. And if you guys were doing something really precise, something sci-fi, something with mechanical looking precision, then when you were painting these highlights, you could use your old marquee tool to create really good, clean edges on some of these things. Again, I'm not as worried about it because this is going to have a little bit of a rugged sort of medieval quality. So I'm okay with there being a bit less precision to some of these, but if you did have that, you could just use your marquee tools to keep yourself really precise on those things. Okay, so this area here, I'm going to play with a subtle sloping of this shape. And these are things that will just come to you, right, as you see the other forms around it take shape. You'll get some clarity on what you want to do. And paintings are a puzzle. You've got all these designed puzzles, all of these value puzzles, and the best way to approach it is just to fill in the pieces that are most easily solved, like the ones that are most obvious to you. Fill those in first, because then the question areas become smaller and smaller, right? And it's like when we're putting shadows in a piece, some of the trickier shadows, save those till later, right? So you're doing a character, well, some of the obvious shadows might be in the kind of eye socket areas, underneath the chin, right? Under the arms, underneath the character casting on the ground. And then maybe trickier areas would be maybe some of the subtle shadows between, objects they're holding, or, on the kind of waist area, maybe there's some elements hanging, right? I mean, it just, it makes a lot of sense to start with the stuff that's obvious to you. Fill in as much of the puzzle as you can. It's almost like a word puzzle or something, right? Where you're starting to fill in the letters and leaving fewer blanks, and then the word becomes clear to you. I don't know if that was a great analogy, but it's the best I got right now. You can see that without too much time, we're starting to get quite a bit of a 3D feel, some of these shapes, which is neat to see come together. as we approach this horizontal divider here is where we start to face the unfortunate reality that we cannot mirror our painting across this line either because of our light direction, right? So that's something we're just gonna have to do by hand, but that's gonna be fine. I mean, it's more work, but it's going to have a much cooler result. It's gonna feel a lot more real, or just it's gonna have a bit of a more dramatic quality to it than having the light that's completely radially symmetrical. It'll be more fun to see that sort of cascading directionally down from the top there. Overall contrast is not something I'm very worried about because, again, we can easily boost that up later. And I could come in here with a color dodge brush, and I could start to bring in crazy highlights on this stuff, get them to feel really metallic, right? I mean, you can see here. That's that's the easy part, is blowing some of that stuff out. I'm not worried about it. This is about just defining all the subtle curvatures happening. Getting some fun edge details happening. Then we can make everything feel super chromy if we want later. Yeah, it's not a pass that I'm worried about. Oh, that area's getting a little dark there, isn't it? It's okay. So like when you're adding the base notes of the image, the darkest values, you're looking for those little crevices, the T intersections, and those points where we're going to have ambient occlusion. The light glue. And of course, depending on how much overlap you want to show here, you could even have a sense of a cast shadow coming out. But I think that the tolerance between these two plates here is tight enough to where we're really not going to have a cast shadow necessarily. I guess this lip could be coming up high enough to where we get more of it coming down like this, but certainly not kind of coming over on this side. So we'll have just a bit of ambient occlusion between those sections. But I find this process really relaxing. Just kind of digging in here and really expressing these forms, you know, thinking like a sculptor and just watching everything sort of take shape. you guys are trying to bring in a nice soft shadow in a tight crevice like this, sometimes it can help just use your lasso tool to give yourself a nice sort of element there to work with. Not that I will do it in this case, but let's say we wanted to get some soft shadow coming in, some ambient occlusion from this crevice here. We could, with the hard selection there, we could take a big soft brush and paint from outside the selection, slowly kind of ease in that shadow here. We can see it gives us a nice sort of soft gradient coming in. I might actually keep that, didn't look too bad. Same thing here, we could free lasso or polygonal lasso this little shape, hide the selection, smoke in that shadow. You can use Control H to hide your selection, and you can use Caps Lock to get rid of the brush size, so you can really get crazy clarity on what exactly it is you're adding to the image. I'm going more detailed than you expected. All right, yeah. I mean, I definitely always saw it in my head like this, with a pretty high degree of rendering. If you want it to feel like you're looking at something real. And we'll bring in some tricks after we're feeling pretty good about the grayscale render, the base grayscale render here. We'll bring in some tricks to introduce some nice subtle color variation using the select color range feature and some hue adjustments. Bring in some nice little bounce lights. Manually paint in some color variation. Add some unique asymmetrical damage. That's all the fun stuff. Excited for that. And there's something kind of fun about each stage of the process, right? It's just a different mindset. You know, here we're thinking about light and form, whereas before we were thinking about design rhythm, shape language. Balance and ratio, composition. Those are the first things on our mind, and now we're thinking about light and form, material. Yep. No worries. Yeah, these are the back side of the cards, exactly. So these will be, we had some, we're intending on these center of these, the offset of these colored glass elements are not right now with our final render, but this was from the earlier pass. Those sections will be with the stats and the icons for the 6 stats we have on the back of the card. So we've been designing the area in between those, and now we're sort of painting all that up, and there'll be kind of a metal or stone quality to this. I'm thinking that maybe this kind of central piece is metal, and then these plates on the outside are more stone, and then the stuff in here will be like a backlit stained glass, and they won't be just one color. We'll introduce a bit of color variation. We might even introduce a bit of a sort of a fractal glass element within there, but that's the basic idea we're working with. We can see here too, if we do an auto levels on this, we can see the the full value range of what we're painting here. We're working very subtly right now because we're going to build it up slowly and be very precise about where those highlights are going to be, but we could see that there's quite a lot of information happening in there. But yeah, I like to do it slow and steady. But I think, unfortunately, we've reached sort of the end of this stream, guys. But I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the next phase of this design come together, and it's going to be a fun part of the process where we're just seeing it all become very 3D and starting to see the materials come to life. And I mean, we can just imagine when we start mirroring this stuff we're working on here and seeing it, fill the entire back of the card. That's going to be really neat, really fun to see. I'm sort of having to control myself, stop myself from mirroring to see it come together. There's this, this desire to just see it all at once, but it's kind of it slows us down. So we're going to just focus on getting this rendered, and then we'll mirror when we get to a pretty decent point. But it's kind of a fun reveal when we get to that point, and we'll do it not at the very end, right? We'll do it before then, because we want to introduce some unique asymmetry and damage to each side, so that it doesn't look like cheaply mirrored, right? It's going to be mostly mirrored, but I want to have even just a few kind of dings and nicks can help sell the effect of it not being mirrored. So we'll definitely do that. That's going to be an important part. But anyway, last quick note for you guys. So as you know, I've been kind of doing this. This is a normal time slot for Brandon. He was streaming for quite a while there, and then he got kind of busy, so I was taking over for him.